Big Lez's League, an all rugby league experience.
Hello, welcome back to Big Lez's League, an all rugby league experience. I'm your host, Big Lez. We're going to be going through Queensland's origin rankings by position, obviously changing it up and putting it in the tier system. We did it for the post for New South Wales, and a bit of confusion around that as well. Obviously, with the tier system, we put Cam Murray in the hooker tier system, for example, as well as the second row and lock tier system. He's played second row, he's played lock forward, and he's got the body shape where if there was a lot of injuries in that New South Wales side, he probably would get shoved in there. And that's like in the worst case scenario if you've got Blake Brayley, when all the main guys, Api Coruscant, Damien Cook, Reece Robson, if they're all out, if everyone that can play hooker is out for New South Wales and it's the last, resort, then he'd probably slot into that position. Or if there was an injury during the game, he could slot into that position as well. I'm not saying that Cam Murray is going to get picked for New South Wales, but he would be in the tier to get picked in that jersey if there was a bunch of injuries, if that makes sense. That was what we were going for with the tier system. I wasn't trying to say that Cam Murray is going to be the hooker for New South Wales. But we're going to go into the rankings here. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense when we go through these. We're going to go through it in the tier system now as well, just to make it a bit easier. And I've also narrowed it down to players that are more likely to get picked. And then obviously, in the bottom tiers, a few smokies as well that I think you guys will like. We'll start off with fullback. In tier 1, you got to go with Reece Walsh here. Obviously, with KP injured, it looks like Reece Walsh is going to get that jersey. I don't think anything other than injury is going to take him out of that spot. Yeah, let's go straight into team 2. I don't think we need to explain, Reece Walsh too much. He's been terrific. He has been so good for the Brisbane Broncos. Yes, he does have a few errors in his game at the moment, but that's just because he's willing to get his hands in the ball. A lot of times he's willing to make that play for your footy side, and that's what I love about Reece Walsh. So no arguments there. He is your fullback for the Queensland Maroons. Going into the second tier, since KP's out, you're probably going to go with an AJ Brimson in that second tier. You think back to only last year in Game 3, AJ Brimson was the guy to come in with Reece Walsh, I think injured or suspended. He might have been suspended for that game, I'm pretty sure. But AJ Brimson was that guy to come in. So AJ would probably be the guy in that second tier to come in that fullback role if Reece Walsh was to go down. You'd imagine then the next guy up would be Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow, playing fullback at the moment for the Dolphins. I think what puts him down a peg is injury. Obviously, just coming back from a hamstring injury, I think over the next few weeks. I don't know if he's even going to be available. It depends how his rehab's going. But in terms of the tier list, he would be number 2 in that 2 rank with AJ Brimson. You move down to the next tier. This is where it sort of gets interesting. A guy that's played fullback for the Maroons before and can fill in there, if need be, if there's a few injuries, is Cameron Munster, and he's done it before for Queensland. Yes, it probably wasn't the best origin game from Cam Munster, but he can fill in that position, and he'd probably be the next guy up if all of these guys in tier 2 and 1 are injured. You'd then look at guys like Jaden Campbell. Obviously, he's been out for quite a while too this season, so I probably would stay away from him unless there's a lot of injuries in this Queensland squad. Now, one's a bit controversial, obviously, because he's vocalised that he wants to play for New South Wales, but he's eligible for Queensland. It's Jahream Buller at the moment, eligible for Queensland. They could pick him tomorrow in that Queensland side. It scares me as a New South Welshman because he probably is the future. Somewhere down the line, if there's some injuries, you probably see him slot into the Origin squad somewhere. He definitely is a bit of a smoky, and he's probably been one of the more consistent guys. Even in, some of his poorer games this season, he still runs 120, 130 metres. He still has 5, 6, 7 tackle busts, and he's still probably one of the more dangerous guys on the field for the Tigers as well. So, and as far as smokies go, I think that he's definitely the biggest smoky really we're going to go through in these lineups, or maybe even not the biggest. He might be second, third biggest, but definitely up there in terms of your smokies. We then go into tier 4. Now, these guys I don't think are going to get picked unless, worst case scenario in this fullback position. The first one, Xavier Savage. He's been fantastic for Canberra. In talk about smokies, I think that he would definitely be in that conversation as well. He'd be more likely to get a spot on the wing, obviously playing there more for the Canberra Raiders this season. But he did spend a whole season, or at least half a season, with Canberra in that fullback role. So we know how well he can play at fullback. And even seeing him on the wing, he roams the park so well. So I think that he could still kill it if put in that sort of position tomorrow. But again, I don't think he's going to get that role realistically unless there's a bunch of injuries. So definitely a bit of a smoky. Another guy for the Brisbane Broncos that's played a handful of games this season, while Reece Walsh has been out with that facial fracture, is Tristan Saylor. What a player we have on our hands. We talk about the future of the game. He's definitely a guy that's probably going to find a way into another NRL squad very soon. The fact that he was talking to go to the Super League, or potentially still going to the Super League as well, it just blows my mind. Hopefully he pulls back on that deal and signs with an NRL club, because he's just got so much talent. And if there's an 18th club that comes into the conversation in the next 2 to 3 years, which I imagine there will be, I think that he's the first guy that they're going to be going for. He is an absolute freak. You then go and look at some of the other guys that can fill in there mid-game if there's an injury. You're looking at guys like Dane Gagai and Valentine Holmes, Val Holmes obviously played fullback before for the Cronulla Sharks, and Dane Gagai played fullback before as well for the Newcastle Knights. So both of them could cover there if there's a few injuries in your side. We then move on to the wing. I think the front runners in Tier 1 for the wing spots are Selwyn Cobbo and Xavier Coates at the moment. Now, Xavier Coates out this week with injury, I believe, which is going to sort of throw that a bit of a spanner into the works. Obviously, recording this before round 9. It's going to come out after round 9. But yeah, he's obviously out this week. It is going to be interesting to see, how long this recovery time is, if it's injury, if it's suspension. I haven't heard about it, or at least I've forgotten about it. But yeah, definitely for me, if he's not injured, he's probably going to make that squad for me on the wing with Selwyn Cobbo. In Tier 2, the next guys up, you're looking at Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow. Again, we've spoken about him. His ability is unreal, and he can fill in a number of spots as well. Centre, winger, fullback. He can roam the park as well off the bench, which we've seen him do for the Cowboys. I think that he could do a great job on the sting, but I think he's going to be in the next position, which we'll talk about in a second. You're then looking at guys like Murray Taulagi as well, who is a bit of a smoky. He's out at the moment as well with injury. It depends how long his recovery time is as well, and I think that puts him down the pecking order. I think that's what puts Xavier Coates up the pecking order as well, just the fact that Murray Taulagi, is injured at the moment. But yeah, Murray Taulagi does sit around Tier 2 for me at the moment with Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow. You then move into Tier 3. You've got guys like Val Holmes, who's in another position, which we'll talk about in a second. Dane Gagai, who I think is just on the fringes of both wing and centre, which we'll talk about, as I said, in a second. And then Corey Oates, obviously dropped this week for the Broncos, which is a bit of an interesting one, and definitely one that I felt was unexpected. He's been playing quite well in that side for the Broncos. But yeah, look, he's got the Origin experience. You can't really argue putting him in that Tier 3. Tier 4, we've talked about a few of these guys, but there's another few names that I've chucked in here as some smokies. Obviously, we talked about Xavier Savage. His ability is unbelievable. He's played a lot of wing this season. He's definitely going to be that smoky considered for a role there. Depends what Billy Slater wants to do. You then go and look at guys like Jojo Fafita, who, again, you probably don't look at these sort of guys unless there's injuries. Isaiah Tass from the South Sydney Rabbitohs, I think, has been one of the shining lights over the past 2 years for the Rabbitohs in terms of guys coming through. And then Anari Tuala, who's been fantastic for Newcastle as well. Talk about smokies. If there's a few injuries, we could see his name pop up in the extended bench, or at least coming into the squad. You then move to centre. It's a very similar conversation yet again here. My front runners would be Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow and Valentine Holmes, we've spoken about both of these guys. Insane ability, in form at the moment. Great defensively as well. I think both of these guys get the crack at centre. You're then looking at Dane Gagai and Selwyn Cobbo in Tier 2. Selwyn Cobbo actually playing centre this year already, so you probably do consider him for the centre position, maybe over the wing. It depends how Billy Slater wants to put his side together, but Dane Gagai, as I said, he will be on the fringes for centre and wing. You then move to Tier 3 for centre. I wouldn't be chucking this guy at centre for my Origin side, but he has played a bit of centre over the past 2 years. It's Murray Taulagi. Again, I think he's more likely to play on the wing. He's very 50-50 though, depending on how his injury return goes. You're then looking at smokies like Kurt Capewell, who at the moment, in terms of Origin form, he's not really in the best form, and he's been in and out of that Warriors side, so it does put him down a few pegs, but definitely in the conversation. If there's a few injuries, he probably comes in like he's done in the past. And then testing you as a bit of a smoky there as well. He's been great for the Dolphins. I think that he'll definitely be someone to think about over the next few years, 4 or 5 years of Origin. And then tier 4, a few rookies and some guys that can play in the centres to throw you away. Jojo Fafita we've spoken about. AJ Brimson has played centre to start the year. If there's a number of injuries, you probably consider him. Isaiah Tass and Ari Chihuahua, who we've spoken about. These sort of guys get considered as well. Let's move into the 5'8 jersey. Obviously, the front runner is Cam Munster. We spoke about it a few weeks ago on the Random Stats Guy podcast when we were talking about how we're going to stack up this Queensland side. I'd probably go with Cameron Munster now that we've seen him come back into this Melbourne side and play with such great form. We had Tom Dearden as the front runner, obviously with Munster having a few issues with his groin. But, Munster looking great at the moment. There's no reason why you wouldn't pick him. Tier 2, we just mentioned him, Tom Dearden. He is so close. I think when DCE and Cam Munster do retire over the next 5 years, Tom Dearden, Sam Walker, Ezra Mam, these 3 guys we've got in Tier 2, they will be the front runners for this Origin side. I think that we could see potentially Tom Dearden with his body shape play maybe even a bit more of a Ben Hunt role, coming off the bench and playing a bit of a utility role, playing a bit of 9. We could see Sam Walker, Ezra Mam in the halves. You could see Tom Dearden and Ezra Mam in the halves. It could go any which way with these 3 blokes, but you'd have to, you can't really deny that these guys are the future of Queensland Origin halves. Tom Dearden, Sam Walker, and Ezra Mam. Tier 3, this is where it gets a bit interesting, and this is probably where I'm going to get the most criticism. Tyson Gamble, Tier 3 for me at the moment. There's not too many halves for the Maroons to talk about, so, really had to dig deep to find these sort of guys, but Tyson Gamble's probably in Tier 3. You're also looking at guys like Dejan Arce. Both of these guys definitely not making the Queensland side anytime soon. I wouldn't say they probably make Queensland in their careers unless there's a bunch of injuries or unless they become the Nathan Clearys of the game where they slowly get better and become one of the better players in the competition, which, to be honest, I doubt. And that's nothing against them. It could happen, but I just can't see it at the moment. I can't see them, being above guys like Tom Dearden, Sam Walker, and Ezra Mam with the trajectory that they're on. And then obviously AJ Brimson as well. He's played a bit of 5'8". You think if there's a few injuries, he probably comes in if he's already in the squad. Then Tier 4, this is where it gets a bit interesting as well. Obviously, these guys are probably no chance unless it is probably, unless Queensland get absolutely slaughtered with injuries, these guys are no chance. You're looking at guys like Brad Schneider, Kurt Mann, and Jaden Campbell. And again, probably no chance at making that 5'8 position. You then move into halfback. Obviously, front runner, DCE, he's done it for a while now. You probably don't look at any which way unless, he retires tomorrow. I think that DCE gets that halfback jersey. Again, you're looking at guys like Tom Dearden, Sam Walker, and Ben Hunt for Tier 2 for halfback. Ezra Mam and Tyson Gamble, Tier 3 for halfback. And then probably Brad Schneider, Tier 4. Again, probably not going to get selected for Queensland anytime soon unless he becomes Nathan Cleary, which I just doubt. In terms of the prop rankings for your Queensland side, you'd think that the front runners at the moment for the front row would be Ruben Cotter and Lindsay Collins. There's a bit of conjecture around Lindsay Collins at the moment, just with his form and just how he's come back from injury, but I imagine he's still the front runner. I mean, with all those avocado seeds shoved up him, I think that he can just do some unbelievable things, and we saw what he could do, obviously, in the last series as well. After the last series, you can't really argue with him being in that starting front row with Ruben Cotter. Tier 2, you're looking at guys like Tommy Flegler. I think that he probably makes his way back into this side off the bench for the Maroons, and I think he will do a great job for them as well. Mo Fodawaker, he's come in last year and done a great job. He's in Tier 2 for me. He'll be out this week for the Titans, which will be very interesting to see how the Titans go without him, but when he comes back, I'm sure Billy Slater will still be considering him for a bench spot. And then Paddy Carrigan. He's probably the front runner for lock. I'll give that away right now. But yeah, in terms of front row, probably second in line. I had him in my front row just as a bit of a bogey play, but Then I realised when you're putting this side together, it doesn't really make too much of a difference what number is on Paddy Carrigan and Ruben Cotter's backs. They're basically playing the same role anyway. So in terms of front row, you probably have Ruben Cotter in the front row. And then in terms of front rowers, you probably have Paddy Carrigan in that second tier. But then again, you probably move him up to first tier because he's guaranteed a spot in this Origin side, whether it is in the front row or at lock. Tier 3, you're looking at guys like Corey Horsburgh, who's obviously injured at the moment, but debuted and did a great job for the Maroons. You're looking at guys like Christian Welsh, who off the bench for Melbourne has been unbelievable. Not unbelievable, but he's been very, very good for them over the past few weeks. So I wouldn't be surprised if Billy Slater does pick him as a bit of a smoky to come back off the bench. It's obviously been in that Queensland side before, starting in the front row. I think that he could potentially work his way back into this side as well. We'll have to wait and see. And then a bit of a smoky, and this is a real smoky that I think I'm going to get absolutely flogged for in the comments, but I'm willing to take it, is Josh Kerr. I think that he's been great for the Dolphins off the bench. I think that he's provided real spark. He's got a high offload count. He's really, really dangerous in and around the ruck. I think that he will be a bit of a smoky call as well. I believe he was in that worst side ever for Queensland as well. So, a little bit of Origin experience there. Not too much, but just a little bit. He might be a bit of a smoky to make the squad at least, but maybe even a smoky to come off the bench. We'll have to wait and see how Billy Slater forms this rotation. Now, tier 4, guys that you probably won't pick. You're looking at guys like Keenan Palacio, who's been out for most of the year. Doubt he makes the squad. Tom McKaylee, who's been quite good for the Cowboys since coming into that side. And from what we saw from him in the trials, we know that he can be something special off the bench there for the Cowboys. And I thought even last week he was great. You're looking at guys like Francis Molo, who is just an absolute machine on his best day. You're looking at guys like Kobe Hetherington, who is very dangerous in and around the ruck for the Broncos. He does the little things right, which is just so good for them, and it really makes that rotation with him off the bench work. It's why he gets picked every week. And then obviously Jared Wallace as well, who's been there a number of times earlier in his career. So he's probably obviously in the discussions. But again, these guys probably not going to make it over the guys we've spoken about beforehand. Tier 4 is basically guys that are real smokies. Tier 4 is guys that probably won't make the squad. Then you go to hooker. Obviously, the front runners here for that 9 and 14 jersey are Ben Hunt and Harry Grant. I don't think there's anyone really pushing. When Kalen Ponga was still in the frame, maybe you go for a bit of a smoky rotation with KP in that 14 jersey coming on, playing a bit of a roaming role. But this hooker 1-2 punch has worked out so well for them in the past. I just doubt that they're going to change it up this year. I think with a side that's won over the past few years, as I said, I really doubt that they're going to change up too much here. So Ben Hunt, Harry Grant in that tier 1, they're probably going to be the 9 and the 14. Doesn't matter which order, they're going to be there. Tier 2, this guy's been incredible for the Bulldogs to start the year. His defense has been great. He's been a little bit of a general there at 9 and so chirpy and passionate to wear that Bulldogs jersey. I imagine he'll be the same if he did get a crack at Origin. I think he's a little bit far away from that yet. I think that if Ben Hunt if Ben Hunt and Harry Grant get injured, he'd probably then look at a guy like Reid Marnie. But other than that, I think that he is still behind those two guys in making his debut. But yeah, definitely someone to consider in the squad for sure. Definitely someone to consider for the future for that hooker 1-2 punch. Then tier 3, a bit of a smoky, and he's been doing very well for Canterbury before he got injured. And coming back into this side, I'm very excited to see how he goes. Kurt Mann, I think that he's a real smoky for a little bit of a utility role if there's a few injuries as well. Just in terms of a forward coming off the bench, if you want to go for a bit of a different rotation here, he might be a guy that you chuck in that jersey number 17. You just don't know. He's been great in that lock forward role off the bench. He can play big minutes for this Queensland side as well. And, we had Rando singing his praises only a few weeks ago as well as to how good of a player he can be off the bench here for the Maroons. And, having a wild card like him on the bench for Queensland as a New South Wales fan, I think is pretty scary in itself. You're then looking at guys like Ruben Cotter, who could slot in there during a game if there was an injury. He's played hooker to start his career, so I wouldn't push past it at all. If he was coming off the bench and, for an example, Ben Hunt got injured just before the game, he could play a bit of a hooker role off the bench and give Harry Grant a bit of a spell, or let Harry Grant roam the field and play that roaming role that he has played in that hooker 1-2 punch. You then look at the 4th tier guys that probably won't get picked in this position or in this role. Tom Dearden's played 14 before, I think, or maybe he just came in for Cam Munster. But I think that he could play that 14 role very, very well. If you're trying to push him into this side, when Ben Hunt retires, just to get him into the Queensland jersey, you probably do put him in that 14 jersey. It's been done a number of times before with Origin. You know, halves, centres, outside backs getting shoved into the forward pack and just run through the middle and give me your best. It's happened a number of times, I should say, before, and I could see it happening with Tom Dearden when Ben Hunt does retire, but until then, I don't think we're going to see Tom Dearden playing that role. And then Tyson Gamble obviously has played a little bit of lock and hooker before for the Newcastle Knights as well. So if they're absolutely hammered with injuries, it could be a direction you go in. But as I said, tier 4, it's for guys that you probably don't pick but are smokies and have played that position before. Now, going into the second row, obviously the front runners here are Jeremiah Nanai and Dave Fifita for me. If you're looking at how to structure this team, Fifita on the left, you then have Nanai on the right. We have seen Jaden Sewer move over to that left back row, which sort of indicates that maybe he is getting ready to be picked in the left back row for State of Origin, and he's probably been one of the standouts for St. George, even in the poorer games, even in that 60 point affair. The Roosters scoring 60 points on Anzac Day on the Dragons. We did see that Jaden Sewer was probably one of the better players, other than, pushing Moses Sully into Jared and getting him knocked out. I thought that Jaden Sewer was probably one of the better players on the park in that Anzac game, and he was in my team of the week that week as well. So Jaden Sewer, he's in my tier 2 at the moment. You probably do start for Fifita and Nanai. Sewer can also play a bit of a role off the bench in the middle as well. He's got so much intent, the way he runs the ball. He loves a tackle bust. Really tough competitor. I could see him playing a role off the bench if that's the way that Billy Slater wants to go. Ruben Cotter's played second row. He's been shoved in there late before the game starts as well. Wouldn't be surprised if that happens again this year. Tier 3. You're looking at guys like Felice Kafusi. Again, he's probably at that stage in his career where he doesn't come in now, but, if they are struggling with depth in the forwards, you probably maybe do see him come in. More likely to come in off the bench, but, he's been the Queensland back row for so long now. We might even see him just get the spot. We don't know. It could be that real smoky. Bo Firma comes to mind, obviously. Myself and BKR Sport, Blaze from BKR Sport, we did a podcast on the Titans before the season started, just talking about Bo Firma as well, coming back from injury and how it was probably going to walk his way back into the Queensland side. The form hasn't been what we thought it was going to be. But again, if there's a few injuries, maybe you do see a Bowie Firma come into the frame here for Queensland. Before he got injured with that ACL injury, he was in the discussions for Origin. So maybe over the next few weeks, we do see him play up and try and earn himself a jersey there, even in the extended squad. Kurt Capewell then comes to mind for your tier 3s if there's a few injuries as well. But again, he's been in and out of that Warriors side, and form sort of indicates that maybe he isn't ready to step back into that Origin side. Your tier 4s, guys that probably won't get selected in this sort of role. You're looking at Josh Kerr. You're looking at Jack Howarth. You're looking at Trent Liero, which is a bit of a smoky. And then you're also looking at guys like Kobe Hetherington, who we spoke about before. Now, going into the lock forward role, the last role of the day. Tier 1, we've spoken about it already. I don't think this is going to be too surprising to too many people. It is Paddy Carrigan. He is an absolute freak there at 13. He's one of the better 13s in the competition at the moment. He gets that spot. I cannot see anyone pushing him out of the way for the 13 jersey. I just can't. Ruben Cotter's your number 2 there for 13. As I said, when you're picking Ruben Cotter and Paddy Carrigan in this side, there isn't too much difference between them. They play a very similar role. They can ball play through the middle and be that link man through the middle. Whether that one's 8 and one's 13, it really doesn't matter. Tier 3, you're looking at guys like Fifita, who has been playing a bit of a role in the middle and on the edge for the Gold Coast Titans. He's been coming off the bench and just playing where the Titans need him, and he's been one of the Titans' better players too, with Tino out. So Dave Fifita could play a role through the middle off the bench, and obviously if there's a few injuries, he could slot into that 13 jersey as well, and I think do a really good job. Not so much with the ball playing, but more so just as an X-factor guy. You just don't know what you're going to expect from a Dave Fifita at 13. I think that wild card play could scare a few people. We spoke about him before, playing a bit of a lock role for the Bulldogs and killing it. Kurt Mann is a smoky for this Queensland side. You can hand me in the comments and I will cop every single bit of it. He is a smoky for this team. He is an absolute weapon there at 13. Then you're looking at Corey Horsburgh again, not likely to get picked in that role. Tommy Flegler, not likely to get picked in that role. And then Trent Liero, a bit of a smoky as well for this squad, but I don't think will make the 17. Tier 4s, guys that obviously can slot in there if there's injuries, but this is if we're bombarded with injuries. You're looking at guys like Harry Grant, who obviously plays a bit of that role anyway off the bench with that hooker 1-2 punch. Kobe Etherington, Josh Kerr, Reed Marnie, and then obviously Tyson Gamble as well to play a bit of a roaming a roaming lock forward role off the bench. But again, very unlikely to get picked in that position. Hopefully there's a little bit less confusion around that as well, guys. Obviously, I know you guys didn't really get it the first time. Hopefully now that I've explained it, it makes a little bit more sense. How this tier list sort of works. Make sure if you want any more content like this to like and subscribe to Big Lez's League. We've got an audio podcast on Spotify and Apple as well with plenty of content on there. Make sure you get stuck into that subscribe on the Spotify, Apple podcast. Follow me on Instagram, Big Lez's League _, and then obviously Big Lez's League podcast on TikTok as well. Plenty of exclusive content on the TikTok as well that you don't get on the Instagram. So make sure to hop on there. Follow, like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one.